Labour activist Nathan Bordoa, who is with us now. Nathan, thank you for joining me this afternoon. A majority of voters believing the country is heading in the wrong direction. 41% of people saying they're worse off under Labour since they came to power in July. Do you think they're right? What do you make of these statistics?
Well, I think they're a reflection, Peter, of the inheritance of this government, of the worst possible
But this is about Labour, Nathan. It's not about an inheritance. It's not about the Conservatives. It's about Labour.
It is, but it's in the context of 14 years, and that inheritance was, slow growth, the highest taxes in 70 years, poor performing public services, and a £22 billion black hole, and that's the context. And it's
but we're 4 months in. We're 4 months in, Nathan. Isn't it time for your party to stop making excuses and actually to go on its own record, which has hammered pensioners, it's hammered farmers, it's hammered people who make sacrifices to send their kids to private schools, and it's hammering people who set up their own businesses and have to pay huge national insurance?
Well, the context is really important here, because we obviously had a government in place for 14 years, and I'll talk about the dire economic inheritance, but also the societal trust black hole in politics, and I think that's reflected here. And I think you've seen a government over the last 14 years that's focused on sticking plasters, whereas what we hope to see in the next few months and years is sort of long-term investment paying off once the foundations have been fixed. I mean, you saw in the budget, Rachel Reeves has changed the fiscal rules to consider assets as well as liabilities, boosting investment, boosting private sector investment, as we saw at the Guildhall. You saw that in Imagine House speech last week with pension fund reform to consolidate them, to boost investment in the UK. You see that with Angela Rayner's work around planning reform to get the homes built needed to turbocharge growth. Devolution that she's pioneering as well, working with Johnny Reynolds on workers' rights as part of an employment rights bill to give more people rights at work. And next week, we're looking at the economic activity white paper that Liz Kendall and Wes Streeting are pushing to get more people into work. So is your
position, Nathan, sorry to interrupt you, as I have a number of times, apologies for that, but is your position essentially that when people realise what Labour is doing, when this all sort of kicks in, actually they'll be grateful to Labour come the next election, and the pain is perhaps happening now to get that out of the way before things get better, because it has to be, because of the inheritance that you're talking about from the Conservatives?
The metric people should judge this Labour government in 5 years is, do you feel better off than you did in July 2024? And that's the inheritance, that's the metric by which most governments are quite rightly judged. And look, once these, as I talk about sticking faster politics over the last 14 years, focus on gimmicks and short-termism, whereas actually this long-term profound investment into the future of the country, a future-focused government, actually we can deliver for the country, and that's what this government's doing. And look, you look at the opposition at the moment, they want to retain all the benefits of everything the government are doing without paying any of the costs.
But in terms of the short-term pain for long-term gain that you're talking about, we are talking about Labour's own figures, the government's own figures, saying that 100,000 people will be in fuel poverty. Essentially, they'll be putting the majority of their income into fuel in terms of keeping warm this winter. I mean, I know there are tough choices to make when you come into government, if there is, in fact, this £22 billion black hole, which I remain sceptical about. But let's say, for the sake of argument, it exists. Well, actually, those...
It's affecting the OBR borrowing. And the OBR borrowing figures that are released on a 6-month basis, that figure is there, £22 billion.
Well, the OBR, in fact, have said that hasn't come into their thinking, so I think they've actually cast a little bit of doubt on it. But aside from that point, Nathan, the point is that a lot of people now, OK, it's only 4 months in, but a lot of people say, actually, Labour hasn't been on the side of, for example, pensioners. We've had people getting in touch about that. And also business as well. Roy in Gloucester says, after 4 months, other than the public sector, it's hard to believe anyone would ever vote for Labour again. They seem to hate everyone. Pensioners, farmers, successful businesses, the hospitality sector, working people, although I expect the train drivers are happy, says Roy from Gloucester. What would you say to Roy from Gloucester, Nathan?
Well, I'd say to Roy the same thing I'd say to everyone across the country, which is you have to look at the inheritance that this government had.
But he's not blaming the Conservatives, he's blaming Labour.
Of course, but it's the context in which Labour became the government in July was 14 years of decline in a toxic set of economic indicators. But as I'm saying, across pensions policy, the NHS, housing, planning, devolution, this Labour government is initiating that change, and that change will take time for people to feel. But look, rest assured, this is an insurgent Labour government determined to change the country for the better.
OK, Nathan, thank you very much indeed. That is Nathan. Actually, just before you go, Nathan, I just want to ask you, apologies, one more thing, which is just about John Prescott, the former Labour Deputy Prime Minister. You're a young man, but I know you're a student of Labour history, and you will, of course, know the huge contribution that John Prescott made to the Labour Party. It's difficult now to imagine perhaps someone who'd been a steward on a cruise liner, a trade union activist, becoming such a high ranking person within Labour. Although, of course, Angela Rayner, who was a care worker who has become Deputy Prime Minister, would say, well, look at me, she once described herself as John Prescott in a skirt. What do you think his legacy will be?
Absolutely. He has an enormous legacy and enormous contribution to the Labour and, as you say, the trade union movement, and really connecting those voices of working people as he did so well in that Labour government that he served in. And, you say I'm a young man, and of course, I hope that I am, but you look at when I was growing up, the investment in schools and hospitals that I saw, peace in Northern Ireland, Sure Start, the national minimum wage, and John was really at the centre of that, delivering change and standing up for working people.
Do you think that perhaps people will remember him for that punch more than anything else?
I think that the quote after that was "Let John be John," or
it is John is John. John is John is what Tony Blair said at the time, which was quite a good headline, I suppose.
It is. I hope they remember him for his massive contribution to the lives of working people, particularly the national minimum wage that I know he worked on as a cabinet minister and was passionate about from his time in the trade union movement.
Okay, Nathan, thank you. That's Nathan Bordoa there. He is a Labour activist joining us today.